We flew to Karuna in northern Sweden and then 3.5 hours further north by coach to Karesuando on the Finnish border and 160 miles inside the Arctic Circle. Karesuando is a small town of around 300 people. It has a church and a few houses which are spread over a very large area, some of them still with their Christmas lights up. Very few people were out in this deathly quiet, cold place, and only an occasional car passed by. But Karesuando did have a little museum, and also a hotel, the Arctic Star, which still had the remains of a couple of snowmen outside the main entrance. The Arctic Star Hotel would be our base for the next 4 days. From the outside, it didn't look very inviting. However, inside it was warm and comfortable. The restaurant, complete with an interesting chandelier, served us 3 4-course meals a day, and there was a roomy and comfortable lounge area, and of course the bar. Second only to the bar in importance was the notice board, where each day the morning, afternoon and evening activities were listed and who was on them. This is a view from my room, everywhere eerily still, cold and rather murky in the so-called daytime light, which began around 11 a.m. and got dark again by 3 p.m. The next day, after a quick check on the notice board, we met in the hotel foyer, all wrapped up in our thermal suits and headgear, ready for our first adventure at the Reindeer Park over in Finland. A teepee on the right-hand side and a small hut were the park's administrative buildings. The teepee was the most important. We were given a few quick words on reindeer driving, and then it was to our sledges, ready for the off. This took a little time as boots crunched over the frozen snow, waiting for everyone to become settled. We were told it was minus 37 degrees today and to keep well wrapped up. And then we were off. I was in the lead sledge and hung on grimly as the guide trudged off, leading my reindeer at a very sedate pace across the bleak and desolate frozen landscapes. It was also perfect for studying the rear end of a reindeer. Occasionally forms of habitation passed slowly by as my 1.5-antlered reindeer plodded on. It was at this stage that I felt someone keep touching me on my left shoulder, which rather puzzled me. Soon all became clear as the nose of the reindeer behind me came into view, took a quick look at me and withdrew again. This happened a few times, and eventually Cedric, that's what I named him, stayed quite close to me and chatted amicably as we all went along through this frozen land. The sky had now become clear and taken on a beautiful ice blue colour, but there was no sunshine. Cedric told me that the sun should reappear again at about a week's time. He proved to be a good companion, allowing me to stroke his neck as he walked along beside me. A sudden turn to port nearly threw me, but there was Cedric making sure everything was all right. We trudged on with the trees frozen in the grip of winter, silhouetted against the clear, ice blue sky. We were about to do another turn to port, but I was ready for it this time. Cedric came up alongside, and I promised him some tidbits when we got back, which made him lick his lips. We were now almost home after traversing most of northern Finland.
Nearly home now, Cedric. Nearly home, boy.
He came up alongside me for a last cuddle.
Got to say goodbye now.
After a tearful farewell, everyone got out of their sledges rather stiff and rather cold. I watched as the staff took the reindeer out from their sledges and then made my way to that most important teepee where a roaring log fire awaited us. We were given a glass of hot berry juice by a delightful young Finnish girl, who then gave us some interesting facts about reindeers and answered questions.
First of all, the females, they get really stressed out for the working.
Yeah.
And of course they are smaller, so they don't have their power. And they don't really like people.
Right.
Are there a lot of the reindeer farms?
These kind of farms.
Yeah.
Well, there's not a lot of, I wouldn't say there's plenty of reindeer farms in Finland, but there's a few.
Outside again, and with the reindeers now detached from their sledges, it was feeding time. We all went into their enclosure, and a reindeer bun fight followed. You had to watch out for those antlers, though. Actually, it was lichen, not buns, that was given to us to give to the reindeers. Cedric was amongst them somewhere, and no doubt was far too interested in food to have a chat. Now that food was on offer, they came trotting in, the young ones having to compete with the bigger ones for their share. It appears that reindeers don't have any teeth and use just their lips and gums to munch their food. We all took handfuls of lichen to give to the reindeers. It seemed and looked to be somewhat disorganized, but it did work and they all got fed. Those antlers were lethal, but fortunately no one got hurt. After a lot of fun feeding these lovely docile animals, it was time once again to go back to our base at the Arctic Star Hotel, where warmth awaited us as well as the all-important bar. The next day, after a quick look at the programme for the day notices, we were off to get kitted up for a snowmobile drive. A poster gave hints on how to enjoy the cold. I think the best way is to stay indoors. With helmets on and in pitch black darkness, we were given some instructions on how to drive a snowmobile. The idea of such an early start for the ride was to go to a high point to see the sunrise. In the eerie darkness, I waited for everybody to climb aboard their snowmobiles. Then, having formed up in a line, we were ready to go. Unfortunately, we didn't get far, having to stop for somebody's stalling. It was now getting lighter. I checked my instruments to make sure my machine was all right. And then we were really off. The two skis on the front of the snowmobile tended to buck about quite a lot, and you really had to drive the machine rather than just steering it. One's arms and shoulders came in for quite a lot of work. After about an hour we reached the high point, but the chances of seeing the sunrise were nil, as it was so gloomy. Photos were taken, however, of this historic moment.
Oh,
I checked my trusty steed with its two front skis, and all was okay. And then we started off on the way back. As you can see, the snowmobile was continually bucking and bouncing over the uneven snow, and took quite a lot of effort keeping it in a straight line. The important thing was not to lose sight of the one in front. You might get lost. Another stop because of an incident up front. And then it was full speed ahead on the last part of the trip back to the snowmobile base. Once there, we handed in our crash helmets and returned again to the Arctic Star Hotel. We all looked forward to getting into the warmth again. A quick drink at the bar and then into the restaurant for a very welcome lunch. The next day, after checking the board, we got ready and waited in the foyer, ready to be taken into Finland again. Today we were going to have a really exciting time.
So please, the new group, please come here. We will make a place.
We were given some instructions as the dogs made themselves heard in the background. The most important thing was not to let go of the sledge or take your feet off the runners. And then we met the dogs, all of them barking and yelping and striving to be off. And what a racket they made. After being allocated a team of dogs, I could see the two nearest me were trying to outdo each other as they howled away with their heads and noses in the air. Everywhere the dogs were howling and barking, desperate to be off. Once on our way, the noise stopped completely, and with a mush or two, the doggies trotted happily along. The sledge bouncing along, with me hanging on with one hand and filming with the other. Once again, it was a very dull and cold day, but that didn't matter. This was great fun. If we came to a slight rise, the dogs would turn their heads and look back, asking for some help. So one scooted with one foot, making very sure to keep the other foot on the runners of the sledge. One of the staff on a snowmobile hovered in the background. Now and again we had to stop either to sort the traces out or even to change a dog. The moment we stopped, the howling and barking began. Off again and running freely. It was comforting to have a snowmobile close by with one of the staff aboard. Going through the trees was spectacular, but you had to be careful not to get your eye poked out by these low branches. Every now and again, the dogs on the right-hand side would grab a quick mouthful of snow. There's nothing like a good thirst quencher. Back in open country, we made good progress despite the fading daylight. My head torch gave some illumination as the dogs trotted happily along, nearly home. One of the dog handlers then came close on his snowmobile, shouting something in Finnish. I presume it was at the dogs. A sudden turn nearly threw me, but we were home, back in our base again. Saying goodbye to the dogs, it was now very dark, and our minibus, with its engine running, waited for us. We were given a welcome drink of hot berry juice, which went down very well, and then went into a teepee, where there was a nice warm log fire. This was the warmest outdoor spot in Finland.
Catching up with the one in front, whereas when they took that one away, it was really, really great because I didn't have to stand on the brakes so much.
The Husky drive over, which was wonderful fun, it was back again to the Arctic Star Hotel. And a nice hot toddy at the bar. The next morning it was eerily dark as usual until some daylight arrived. Today we would leave Karesuando and Sweden and go by coach to Tromso in Norway. A journey of 160 miles which would take us nearly 4 hours. It had really been fun in Karesuando, with lots of memories.
Surely. When we do cross the border, that's when your phones might then clock over to Norwegian time. The nearest fuel station.
After a few tips from our tour manager, we settled down for the journey. It was cold out there and very inhospitable, with virtually no traffic or people about. This was not the place to break down or slide off the road. The flat, frozen landscape extended as far as the eye could see. Just now and again, we drove through little townships, but these were very few and far between. Gradually the flat countryside changed, and we journeyed on between snow-covered hills that rose up on both sides. With so little traffic, I wondered how on earth the roads could be kept clear of snow and ice. Well, at least there was somebody else on the road. Going round these quite sharp bends, the driver thankfully drove very carefully. The further west we drove, the lighter the sky became. We were now in Norway. It really had been a most interesting journey, and it was not long before we arrived at our final destination. Our base for the next 3 days would be here at the Clarion Collection Hotel Witt. An odd name. Apparently Mr. Witt was the founder. The hotel's restaurant overlooked the harbour front. A fearsome polar bear greeted us as we entered the foyer. Certainly not an animal you want as a pet. The view across Tromso Fjord was really spectacular, with snow on the mountains and the various boats alongside. Tromso's famous bridge spanned the ford, joining the two landmasses. It was -5 degrees outside, and snow and ice still covered everywhere. Tromso's bridge was opened in 1960 and is 3/4 of a mile long, rising in the centre to allow ships to pass through. On the bridge, one was accompanied by the constant roar of the traffic. Whilst filming, I was joined by two of our group, Roy and Poppy, who were going to walk to the other side.
Gotcha.
Did you go right across?
No, I chickened out at the top.
Yeah.
Did you?
Well done.
It was a good old climb to the top of the bridge, and I decided that was far enough for me. The sky was now a beautiful ice blue. Locals reckoned that the sun would reappear in about a week's time. There is Tromso, still in the grip of winter. Looking the other way and towards the east, the busy harbour and our hotel right on the water's edge. This is the view directly opposite from where we were staying in Tromso. A number of fair-sized vessels are anchored here, and this is where Tromso's futuristic Arctic Cathedral, which opened in 1965, is situated. Back on the Tromso side is the Polar Museum, which is housed in the old 1830s customs house, situated right on the water's edge. The old-style lamps give it a very authentic touch. Inside, there are various lifelike tableaus of how life used to be, from chopping wood to skinning a reindeer. There was also a very good display of the various species of seals found in the Arctic. As well as the guns used to hunt and kill them. As you would expect, there were some stunning models of fishing boats. A recreation of the master's cabin of the vessel Polari was particularly interesting, complete with the sound of the steam engine. A hand of cards to pass the time, patience perhaps. Norway's most famous explorer, Roald Amundsen, was well represented. He was the first man to reach both the South and North Poles, and many of his personal effects are here. There is also a faithful reproduction of a sledge loaded with gear and complete with 2 dogs. Arctic foxes are well represented. These 2 young ones look absolutely real. And my favourite is a lovely blonde girl wearing one. This young polar bear really does look cute. Here a big male is intrigued by this curious device which contains a rifle. When he puts his head in to get some bait, the rifle goes off, and it's good night bear. Yesterday we saw the sights at ground level. At the top of this mountain you can see the cable car station. Today we went up to the top to see the views from higher up. With snow and ice in abundance, it was decidedly cold at the top, and you had to be very careful not to slip over. Immediately behind the cable car station, the ground dropped away. I followed the edge along and one of the many views opened up. The contrast between the blue sky, the blue water, and the snow on the hills made it a very picturesque scene. Looking the other way, the snow-covered mountains blended in with the grey sky. Further round, beautifully coloured skies could be seen through the breaks in the clouds. Different patterns emerged as the clouds continually moved around.
That's a little bit too early.
With the cold nipping at one's fingers, toes and ears, the warmth of the cafe in the cable car station beckoned. A plentiful variety of snacks and hot drinks were readily available, as well as from the bar. There was comfortable seating in the lounge area, as well as a TV screen on the wall showing those elusive northern lights. Outside was a great viewing area, but only for the summertime. Large windows in the warm cafe, however, were ideal for seeing Tromso without getting frozen. This wonderful view of Tromso and its bridge made you realise we were pretty high up. That bridge is 3/4 of a mile long. There's some brave or foolish chap trying to get a better photograph. We stayed enjoying the views and a nice lunch until daylight began to fade, soon after 2 p.m. And then it was back to the waterfront area. The lights were coming on in Tromso and on the bridge. The white roof of the Arctic cathedral stood out very clearly against the mountain background. I took a walk along the waterfront and came across some high-powered luxury cruises that were in fact catamarans. And then a Norwegian naval vessel, its masthead silhouetted against the sky, the grey hull contrasting against the snow. On the bridge, the officer of the watch came out to see what I was up to. That angled rake of her prow really enhances her looks. On the way back, I passed this artificial tree in front of an important-looking building. Christmas was still very much alive in Tromso. I thought it looked absolutely wonderful set against the darkening sky. It was dark as I got back to the hotel and took a last look across the harbour. We were due to travel home the next day, and this dramatic view seemed a nice way to remember Tromso. Our winter adventure holiday had been really enjoyable.